I welcome everyone in today's session where we will discuss different type of research methodologies such as qualitative, quantitative and mixed methods for research. We'll deep dive into each type of research methodology and see which one is applicable and which one we have to select. We begin with the introduction to the research methodologies where we'll just understand what is a research methodology, what are the different types of research methodologies, how to select or choose an appropriate research methodology which is applicable for our research, different type of research paradigms, what should be the aim of the research, and what would be the selected or suitable research methodology for that particular aim. When to choose which methodology, right? In which scenario, which method has to be chosen? What are the challenges and criticisms? What are the challenges and criticisms? And finally, we conclude the session. Let's begin with the introduction to the research methodologies. Research methodology or research methods, they refer to the techniques or the strategies which we use to systematically collect and analyze the information or data. The appropriate selection of the research methodology, it depends on the type or the nature of the research problem. It depends on what kind of research problem we are dealing with, and the questions being addressed and the theoretical framework of the study, whether what kind of study we are performing, it's a theoretical study or a practical study or a different kind of survey-based study. According to that, we have to identify an appropriate research methodology. The importance of the research methods is they provide a structured approach. For collecting, analyzing, and interpreting the data. And the proper selection of the method, it ensures the integrity and validity of the research. If we do not select the appropriate research methodology, we may not be able to accomplish the desired outcome. Therefore, selection of the appropriate methodology is extremely important. There are three types of research methodologies. The first one is called the quantitative methods. The quantitative research methods, it generally deals with the quantitative numbers. It generally tests the theories or experiments and identify the relationships among the variables with numbers. So we mostly deal with the numbers. So here you can say this is qualitative, which means it always deals with statistical numbers. You can say numbers, right? Whereas the qualitative method, on the other hand, the qualitative methods of the research, that's an approach which explores and helps us to build the understanding, the meaning of the individual experience, right? So we cannot map it with the numbers, unlike of the quantitative analysis. However, we can have the qualitative research and understand what kind of experiences they are bringing. And the third side, this is a hybrid version, which includes the qualitative as well as quantitative. So you get qualitative research as well as quantitative research. That's the hybrid approach, right? Hybrid approach. Mixed methods, which is called a mixed methods of research. That's an approach which involves collecting both quantitative as well as qualitative data, which means we gather the data and we try to explore qualitatively and we try to back it by quantitatively with numbers. It could be vice versa also. First, we analyze the numbers using the statistical tools. Subsequently, we try to understand what is happening within that using the qualitative approach, looking at the different patterns, experiences, and other things. Let's begin with the quantitative methods. They relies on the quantitative method relies on the numerical and statistical data. Numerical and statistical data that helps us to quantify the problem. And the primary aim is to identify the general patterns and predict the future outcomes. The primary aim is to identify the general patterns and predict the future outcomes. And this approach is rooted in kind of a positivist paradigm, where reality is assumed to be stable, measurable, and observable, which means we can observe that, we can measure the experiment or reality in terms of the numbers, and we can analyze using the statistical tools. That was the quantitative methods. Quantitative methods or quantitative research, it aims to produce the reliable, replicable, and valid results by focusing on the structured techniques and large sample sizes. In generally quantitative methods, we have the large sample sizes. We focus on the data analysis using the numbers through the statistical tools, and we ensure that it is reliable, replicable, and valid. Quantitative research, it employs the structured tools such as, let's say, surveys, experiments, numerical data to test the theories, etc. And the major goal is to establish the relationship or the causality between the several variables. That means, let's say, if I change one particular variable, how much is the change in the another variable? So let's say if I change variable A by 10% positively, what is the change in the variable B which I'm going to measure numerically? Whereas the qualitative methods, they involve the non-numerical data, to explore the concepts, or you can say experiences, or you can say human behavior or you can say social phenomena in detail. It seeks the it tries to understand how individual interpret or make sense of a particular experience, right? In contrast to the qualitative research, in contrast to the other one, generally it aligns with the constructivist or interpretivist paradigms, which means compared to the quantitative, the qualitative analysis, it generally focuses on the constructivist or interpretivist paradigm, where we are more focused towards kind of an exploring what is the meaning behind of a particular experience or experiment or anything, which means we are not dealing with the numbers in that. The goal is to capture the subjective experiences of any target segment, right? And we try to offer the detailed narrative. Generally, this method is used by the researchers to seek the understanding of, let's say, social process, behaviors, or cultural phenomena, or maybe if you're looking at the image analysis, then qualitatively we can understand some of the image graphs or something like that, where the numbers are not involved. In the mixed methods, it integrates both qualitative as well as quantitative approaches. Both qualitative as well as quantitative approaches. Both the approaches, qualitative as well as quantitative, they have certain strengths and certain limitations. That's why integrating both of them can be a great advantage. The mixed methods, that approach is a pragmatic approach, right? So it says that integrate both of them and take the advantages of both of them. Take the strengths of both of them and eliminate the limitations of each other. Mixed methods of research, they combine these methods, both the methods, and try to validate the findings, or you can say explore diverse perspectives and uncover deeper insights that might be missed using a particular single method. Sometimes if we are analyzing the numbers, but we may not be able to capture the human experiences or their opinions. Therefore, if we apply the qualitative and quantitative together, we can have the statistical numbers also, and we can understand the patterns also. It is generally particularly useful in the studies where we need both kind of, let's say, statistical analysis, as well as the context-rich exploration to have more detailed experience or understanding of a particular subject. Let's take few examples to understand what it is and how we use it. So, qualitative study, right? Quantitative study. Let's say for an example, civil engineering. It can be anything. You can correlate with your particular field. So here you can see this. You can take the example of number of bridges, right? And you can see the structural lifespan in the years, which is on the y-axis, and the frequency of the preventive maintenance, which is on the x-axis. And you can see the quantitative study, which is performed, which could be the relationship between the number of preventive measures we take, what is the impact on the lifespan of the number of bridges, and you can apply the regression analysis, and you can study that. For instance, let's say data from 50 bridges, if we have taken and if we have analyzed, it could be quantified that how maintenance intervals influence the material degradation rate, providing the actionable insights for the infrastructure management. For an example, let's say if I am taking multiple preventive maintenance schedules, the structural lifespan or the life of a bridge increases naturally because I'm maintaining it well, it sustains well. That was the quantitative analysis. Let's take another example of the qualitative study. A qualitative study, let's say for an example, if I take a software engineering as a field and we want to investigate, let's say, a developer's perspective for a newly implemented methodology. So let's say, or a new policy has been implemented and what they think about it, what's their experience. Generally, we take the interviews and we try to analyze. For an example, let's say an employee is leaving. There could be an exit interview where we can understand why is he leaving. Is the package lesser? Is the work atmosphere is toxic? Or why is it not suitable? Then we can understand. For example, let's say if I take the interviews of 15 software engineers and they could help to understand that how challenging was the situation is, or they can share the feedback or something like that. Let's take another example of the mixed methods of research, where we involve both of them, quantitative numbers as well as qualitative viewpoints. So such as, let's say, I just take an example of a particular study in the case of a renewable energy. Just an example, you can correlate with anything. Generally, if I want to, let's say, begin with the quantitative analysis, quantitative analysis, and then assess the efficiency of the solar panel which are installed. So I'm installing the solar panels in the particular urban scenario, and so I take the quantitative analysis as well as followed by the qualitative interviews, as well as followed by the qualitative interviews for the field engineers, those who are going in the field and installing the panels. So what are the challenges? What are the issues that they are facing, right? So for an example, let's say we can conduct 200 installments of such solar panels or stations somewhere in the rural areas, and we wanted to highlight the performance trend, and using those numbers we can say that, okay, what is the performance, as well as we can conduct the interviews to uncover what are the constraints that they are facing in the installation, whether the people want to use it, whether they don't want to use it, are there any local regulatory issues, or is there any influence, what is the trend. Along with the numbers, we can study them jointly. choosing the right type of research methodology. Choosing the right type of research methodology is extremely important. Why? Why do we choose the right methodology and how it matters? The choice of the research methods, they determine how effectively we answer our research questions. How effectively we answer our research questions. For example, let's say if we are exploring the live experiences of engineers working in the high stress environment, or you can say rapid response team during the natural disasters, right? And it is difficult to capture that quantitatively. We cannot have numbers about their emotions. So what we have to do is we have to conduct the interviews and apply the qualitative methods to understand their experiences, their coping mechanism. Let's say a natural disaster team is responding, how they cope up, how they make the decision, what is the decision making process. Those things we can only understand by the qualitative method. We cannot deal with the numbers there, because otherwise we don't get the appropriate point what we are trying to derive. That's why choosing the right methodology is extremely important. Selecting the appropriate research methodology is crucial to ensure that the research question is addressed effectively and rigorously. So, what is my research question? And according to that, we have to address. For an example, let's say a data scientist who is working on different deep learning algorithms. In that particular case, quantitative method can play a great role, where we can gather the numbers of accuracy or maybe loss function or many other things, and then compare those numbers, such as there are various parameters, MAE or mean squared error, and then make a table, compare them. Quantitative is the extremely well fit there. However, in previous case, what we have seen, the qualitative was a great fit. So the choice should be based on the critical factors, including that what kind of research problem which we are dealing with, what's the final goal of our research problem, and what kind of data we need. Right? So what we are targeting to present, and what's our philosophical orientation. Considering this, we can consider the appropriate type of research methodology. There are certain factors which influence the appropriate selection, and these are, let's say, first one is the most important thing is the nature of the research problem. Second one is called the research objectives, right? What is our objective? What is the goal, final goal? What is the research question, right? Somehow these two are related. This is a larger one, and this is the micro part of the first one. And what are the practical considerations that we are considering, right? So these are the four parameters. Right? These are the four parameters based on which we select the research methodology, which is suitable with our research question or the problem statement what we are dealing with. The factors influencing the research methodology selections, I'll continue the discussion on this, such as, let's say, first one, the nature of the research problem. The quantitative methods, they are often suitable for the research that seeks to test a particular theory and establish the cause and effect relationship. Such as, let's say, what is the change if I change a particular variable A? What is the change in the target variable B? I can measure it using the quantitative analysis. For an example, if I take the example of a deep learning algorithms, there would be certain hyperparameters. If I change the hyperparameter, what is the change in the mean squared error? So let's say if I change my hyperparameter by 10% positively, and I want to observe what is the change in the mean square error, right? So that in that particular case, quantitative is useful. Quantitative is useful. I misspoke on it. Now, qualitative methods, generally they are suitable when we are exploring the research, right? the area is new or we are new, right? And we want to go and explore it. So we go in the exploratory mode. In that particular case, qualitative is better. Qualitative is better. Next one was research objectives. Now, let's say, what is the goal, right? So if I want to measure and quantify, then I will go with the quantitative methods. If I want to capture the live experiences, understand it more in detail, explore, then I would go with the qualitative research method. It's up to the research problem statement and what is the nature of our research problem, right? The research question. Let's say, for an example, quantitative research is often involved with the questions what we are asking. What is our research question? Such as, let's say, I want to quantify and measure how much, right? What is the correlation, or to what extent that changes? To what extent that changes, which can be quantified. As I said, let's say if I change some sort of hyperparameter, let's say if I change some sort of hyperparameter beta, let's say beta is the hyperparameter. If I change this, let's say by 10%, what is the change? What is the change in, let's say, mean squared error, MSE, right? And I observe and I measure this and measure this. For this kind of questions, we apply the quantitative method. For this kind of questions, we apply the quantitative method. How much, right? The qualitative research questions, on the other hand, such as, let's say, exploratory in the nature. The question like why, right? How? Explore it. We're not interested much in the details of the numbers, but what we are interested is to understand what is the phenomena. In such cases, we apply the qualitative method. There are certain factors which influence, and one of them was the practical consideration. We have to look at the available resources with us. How much time we have? Do we have an access to the data? Do we have enough funding to conduct a particular experiment? Let's say our expertise doesn't lie in the statistical tools, or we are not comfortable with analyzing the huge amount of data. Then quantitative may not suit there, right? Whereas, let's say, on the other hand, our experience, in that case, qualitative would be better. But let's say, on the other hand, we are good at statistical analysis, we are good at data analysis. In that case, quantitative method becomes better. So the familiarity and the expertise of the researcher with a particular method, how familiar and we are comfortable with that particular method, that is important. There are four types of what you call research paradigms, which people talk about. There are four types of research paradigms what people talk about. The first one is called the positivism. Then the next one is the constructivism. Then the next one is the constructivism, interpretivism, and pragmatism, So these are the four paradigms. Let's understand one by one. Let's begin with the positivism. Generally, it assumes that the reality is observable, and it can be discovered through the empirical observations and measurements. Right? And the positivism that aligns with the quantitative methods, as it supports the idea that phenomena can be observed and quantified in the control objective manner, which means, let's say, any experiment, I assume that I can measure it and quantify it. So that is the positivism method. Generally, it provides the structured techniques such as, let's say, experiments and the surveys to gather the numbers. Such as, let's say, election survey to identify which party is getting how many seats. We quantify. On the other hand, there is a second type which is called interpretivism. In contrast to the positivism, it holds and says that the reality is socially constructed and cannot be understood through the objective measurement alone. It says that reality cannot be just understood by the numbers. It is socially constructed, right? So we have to apply the qualitative method and gather the experiences. We have to apply the qualitative methods. We have to apply the qualitative method and gather the experiences to understand the subjective meaning, of the people, and what they mean or what they understood, or what they are speaking. Interpretivism research often involves, such as, let's say, interaction between the researcher and the participants. So very often what we do is we conduct the interviews with the participants and understand what is their opinion. The next type was called the constructivism. Which is closely related with the interpretivism, but what it says that the co-construction of the knowledge between the researcher and participants, or that the knowledge is kind of a progressive and evolving. It's not static. It says that knowledge is an evolving thing and it's not static. And such kind of, let's say, it includes participants' observations, collections, interviews, document analysis, focusing on the understanding process, right, by which the individuals make sense or how they understand. It's kind of a qualitative, supports in the qualitative method, but in the progressive method. So there are two clear-cut methods. One is called qualitative and one is called quantitative. And there would be a huge debate between these two types of methods. Which one we should select, qualitative or quantitative? Now, there is another one which is called the pragmatism approach. They are extremely flexible. They hold the knowledge of both the methods. They're comfortable in analyzing the statistical data. They know the data science also, as well as they are okay collecting the qualitative experiences also. So that's why they are flexible and they are pragmatic, and they say that why to fight, use both of them, take the leverage or advantages from both of them. Why to fight, use both of them, take the advantages and leverage from both of them. Take the qualitative as well as quantitative, right? Both of them. And then that's why it is called a mixed method of research, right? Mixed method of research. Generally, pragmatism, it aligns with this particular mixed methods of research, where we focus on the practical implications as well as the outcome of the research, which means we combine both of them, qualitative plus quantitative. We apply both the methods here. We apply both the methods here. Qualitative plus quantitative, right? And since we apply both of them, that is called mixed methods for research. That's why it is called mixed methods for research, right? So that's how it goes. Now let's see the aim of the research. That is important because based on that, what we select. So based on the aim of my research, we select what kind of methodology has to be used. What is my goal? What is the type of the question? And according to that, I have to select my methodology for data collection and analysis. Such as, let's say, I'm in the exploratory mode, right? I'm exploring. In that particular case, for this exploratory research, maybe I can go with the qualitative. Descriptive research, that is another one, right? And the third one is called the explanatory research. Based on this aim of my research, I apply a particular methodology. Such as, let's say, exploratory research. When we do that, generally we conduct it when the subject is new and it cannot be well understood. The goal is to gain the insights and become much more familiar with the phenomena, right? Often we use the qualitative methods for this. For an example, let's say exploratory research, which investigate the factors that influence the social media usage. Let's say the factors that influence the social media usage among the teenagers, aiming to uncover the new themes or patterns. So I want to understand what is the impact of the social media usage, right? Explore it. What is the impact of the social media usage on the teenagers or the people? They are so addicted with the social media usage, they lose a lot of time in that. When we are too much engaged in the social media, we cannot talk to our subconscious mind, which means we are trapped in the cell phone or somewhere, and then we are unable to get rid of it and come out from that zone, right? So we lose our focus, and we don't do. Sometimes we feel anxiety that where is my cell phone, and I want to get in that, and in that zeal we lose a lot of other important things, and suddenly we go away from our subconscious mind, and we can't talk to it, and we can't leverage the strength of our subconscious mind. Exploratory research often conducted in the areas where very little prior knowledge is available or research exists, right? Very lesser research is existing. Not many papers are available, or the area is totally new, or I want to explore. In that case, the exploratory study will help, and it helps us to frame this hypothesis and understand the boundaries of the research question. For an example, let's say in the emerging field like artificial intelligence, which is emerging these days, right? And what are the ethical issues that we are facing right now, right? The usage of the artificial intelligence tool, or maybe artificial intelligence across any field. What are the ethical issues that we are that have to be addressed? That is the exploratory mode. Or let's say, what is the impact of the AI on the job market or job scenarios, correct? Or you can say positively, what is the impact of the AI on the productivity of an employee or of a person? Descriptive research, on the other hand, it generally aims to describe the characteristics of a given population or phenomena. It focuses on the description side. This type of research often involves, such as, let's say, surveys or observational studies, correct? And then try to describe. For an example, a descriptive study might measure the level of job satisfaction, right? You go to any of company, and then I want to describe how is the work environment there. Is it toxic? If not, then what kind of scenario? I mean, what is the job satisfaction of the workers there? Descriptive studies, generally, they do not attempt to draw the causal connections, but they generally aim to provide the detailed picture. They do not focus on analyzing the things in a causal manner, right? Causal means one leads to the second. So not in that way, but they generally describe the detailed picture. For an example, let's say if I have to have, let's say the national survey on the healthcare access, right? If I just go to the rural area and I can take the interviews and understand how is the access in the for the healthcare services in the rural area, and the goal is to describe the patterns across different demographic groups, right? What they think about it. Are they satisfied with the services provided by the healthcare by our country, or what is the dissatisfaction level? Generally, on the other hand, explanatory research, that's the third part, explanatory research. It seeks to explain the relationships between variables, right? Different variables, what is the relationship? Generally, this is typically the domain of the quantitative research. We mostly apply the quantitative research, and often we try to analyze the numbers and back the evidences for our arguments. Arguments would be backed by the evidences, and such as, let's say, hypotheses are tested to determine the cause and effect relationships. For an example, let's say the explanatory research can be applied to understand the relationships between the socio-economic status and the academic achievements, right? So let's say a person having more number of degrees, naturally his economic status would be decent compared to the person who is uneducated or lesser number of degrees, correct? So the level of the education is also important, because based on that, the economic status of the person can be coming out. In the explanatory research, generally it is designed to test the theories and often involve the statistical techniques to understand the numbers, draw the patterns, and explain the causality. Now, why is it happening? What is the reason? Why are we facing this situation? And all these things would be explored here. For an example, let's say a study on the effects of the education policies. Let's say a new education policy is coming up, and what is the change based on that education policy? What is the change in the student performance? What is the change in the students' performance based on that change in the education policy? And this can be easily quantified because I can measure the students' performance in the form of a percentage, or maybe whatever you call it, grade points or whatever you call it. Quantitative research, right? Now let's go much more deeper into one particular method, which is nothing but a scientific approach, And if I look at the evolution of these quantitative research methods, they generally stemmed out from the basic sciences, such as, let's say, physics, chemistry, or there's those kind of thing where we much more deal with the numbers and try to draw the outcomes for understanding of phenomena through the empirical measurement of the evidences, right? And that's why, and there are certain milestones where people started using these quantitative methods in 17th centuries onwards, right? So quantitative research is a scientific approach, when the definition is the quantitative research is a structured approach, and it seeks to quantify the relationships between the variables. I want to measure what is the change in this target variable if I change the control variable, right? And it's typically used to study where the goal is to test the hypothesis, predict the outcomes, and find the correlations. So goal is to quantify everything. Such as, let's say, it would be hypothesis driven. It should be hypothesis driven, and it should be the variable should be measurable, and we should be able to measure the variable, and it should be having the deductive approach. And the major problem or advantage, you can say, that it deals with the larger size. The problem with the larger sample size is to collect the larger samples or larger data set. That is the problem. But let's say once we have a data set, we can have a replicable or reproducible study, which means, let's say I have a sample size of 10 millions or something like that. And then when I study on that, definitely I can apply that and make a generalized outcome. Whereas in qualitative, let's say a sample size is smaller, maybe 10, 15 interviews, we cannot make it generalized and apply everywhere. That is the disadvantage, as well as you can say advantage of both of them. Common quantitative methods in the quantitative method. What are the common quantitative methods? Such as, let's say, surveys, experiments, and longitudinal studies, using which we gather the data. In surveys, such as, let's say, we are surveying to understand which party will win the election, right? So in surveys, so these are the survey methods, which are used to collect the numbers. So such as, let's say, how many seats are available, and I want to go and survey in the field that which number of seats, how many seats are won by party A or will be challenged by party A, and then how many seats the party B and C are getting. So generally we can have it by the structured questions, and we can conduct the survey, and then we can quantify and say, like, for an instance, survey can be used to gather the information about the people's shopping behavior, right? So generally we can go and say how much shopping you do in a month. So we can quantify and say maybe X amount of money, correct? Experiments. This is another way to gather the numbers, quantify. Generally we perform the experiments and we try to change one particular variable, and we see what is the effect on the dependent variable. So let's say if I have some sort of chemical, right? Correct? If I have some sort of chemical, and that could be, or you can say just the water, right? Just the water. This is called the water level. You can say water level. And let's say if I just start heating it, correct? If I start heating it, this is my temperature, T, and this is called depth of my water level, right? Now, let's say if I increase my temperature T, let's say by T plus 20 degree centigrade, right? What would be the deduction in the water level? Because it will be converted in the steam and it will go off, right? So I can derive the number. So if a change in the temperature by 20% will lead to, let's say, maybe 30% reduction in the water level, right? 30% reduction in the water level. That's how I can quantify it using the experiments. Longitudinal studies, it generally tracks the same subject over the period of time to identify the trends. For an example, long-term impact of the education on the income levels of the people. For, let's say, 50 years we can study, or 2-3 generations we can study, 10 years we can study. So the impact of the education and how much they earn, right? Or their economic status, or you can say their contribution to the society or their lifestyle. Generally, this kind of things can be quantified, and it's a trend-based study, longitudinal study. Common quantitative methods what we use, such as, let's say, hypothesis testing. We apply the hypothesis testing. Hypothesis testing are specific testable statements which are derived from the theory example. Let's say regular exercise which reduces the stress levels in adults. Correct? So generally it's a hypothesis. We can create the hypothesis and we can see that if we do 40 minutes of exercise, how much comfortable we are, and it can be quantified. What's the level of the blood pressure, sugar, other all parameters can be quantified easily. Here the independent variable, right? The variables that are manipulated. Let's say the type of a diet, or you can say 1 hour exercise. Correct? So that's a variable which is called independent variable. If we do the exercise, let's say if I do the exercise for 1 hour, daily. Now people will say, how can you quantify it? We can quantify it easily. You can take a blood report and you can say sugar level, right? You can check your maybe any of the tests, right? And any of the blood tests, right? So report you can find out, and you can observe that, and you continue that practice for an year. That is a independent variable. Keep doing the exercise. What is the change on the health? That you can have a blood report and you can identify your dependent variable. Or you can see, change your diet. You want to gain the weight, eat more, increase the weight, right? If you want to lose the weight, exercise and eat lesser, lose the weight. So these are the dependent variables and independent variable. This is called the independent variable, which leads to the change in the dependent variable, and we can quantify it easily. Loss in the weight or gain in the weight, we can quantify it easily. Quantitative approach, such as, let's say, operationalization, such as, let's say, you want to measure intelligence. How do you measure intelligence? Correct? It can be quantified very easily, and we can say IQ score, quantified. Out of one particular certain number, we have, that's my IQ, right? So, and it's reliable, it's consistent. It consistently measure, right? So consistency of a measure, and it's valid also because we conduct the test on a larger sample size, and we try to measure the accuracy and validity. Often what we do is the scientific approaches which we employ is the statistical analysis. Techniques such as, let's say, regression analysis, correlation coefficients, hypothesis testing, t-test, chi-test, right? So these are the testing methods which we use. Quantitative data topics might be such as, let's say, I want to understand the company's profitability. So I just go to the balance sheet, financial statement, look at the free cash flow statement, look at the entire balance sheet, look at the quarter on quarter's profits. What is the net margin of the profit, right? How much taxes they have paid, how much debt is there, right? What is the reserved amount of the money with them? So all these things we just go and study and understand the profitability of the company. Let's say there are many other things. So let's say a comparison of the primary school children's reading marks and their family backgrounds. If I'm spending time with my children for their studies, naturally they will get the good marks or good performance, correct? So that depends on so that kind of things we can quantify and see how much percentage of difference in the performance of the child's grades with reference to the previous one. There are certain strengths and limitations. Strengths include that it can handle the large amount of data. Quantitative analysis is made for handling the large amount of data, and it provides the high reliability because we are applying the larger sample size. We are studying a larger sample size and applying the statistical methods, and that's why if we disclose the process correctly, it can be replicated by anyone, right? That's an advantage. Someone wants to re-study that, can do that. They offer the clear and objective results. There are certain limitations also. It lacks in the contextual understanding. It doesn't give the contextual understanding sometimes, and it misses the deeper meaning. Behind the data. It may overlook the unmeasured variables, or let's say the complexity of the human experiences. Let's say if I wanted to understand the behavior of a human or any phenomena's pattern, animals' behavior or humans' behavior, it fails. It doesn't capture that detail. That's why we go to the secondary method, which is called the qualitative method, which is generally for exploring the depth and context. Right? It goes much more detail, identify the patterns, experiences, and then it provides the conclusion. So generally, the origin of the qualitative research was emerged in the 20th century, where people started understanding the human cultures and human behaviors, right? Human cultures and human behaviors. From there, separate theories came out, and then they started understanding qualitatively. They started studying the lived experiences of the individuals, right? You might find the thesis, the PhD thesis of a certain person who lived in the past. Let's say, for an example, PhD thesis on a Mahatma Gandhi, right? Scholars used to come from Japan, the United States, UK, Canada, Australia, and then they lived in India, and then they studied that person's entire life, and then they tried to extract the qualitative outputs. Generally, it's a grounded theory, correct? So you can say this theory was using earlier one, and then there are multiple shifts from 20th century onwards, or maybe it was always progressive. The qualitative research, the basic definition is it focuses on the experiences, or it focuses on exploring and understanding the perspectives and experiences of the individuals. It focuses on exploring and understanding the perspectives and experiences of the individuals. And it is generally flexible than quantitative. Quantitative is a bit of rigid method. On the other hand, qualitative is sort of a flexible method. It is exploratory in nature, and it is context driven. It's more subjective and extracting the meaning out of them. The sample size would be small intentionally because they wanted to have a focused and carefully selected samples for studies, and those who are most likely to provide the rich detail and insights on the given subject, right? Now, that could be an advantage and disadvantage. Advantage is sample size is smaller, easy to conduct the research. However, it cannot be applicable to some sort of other geographical or demographic group, let's say, which is far away located from that geographic location, because people will have a different lifestyle, different culture, right? So it may not be applicable to diverse groups. That is a disadvantage. How do we do the qualitative study? There are 4 methods. We conduct the interviews. The second one is we frame the focus groups. Third one is we send the ethnographies and the case studies. So these are the four points, or these are the four what you call methods which we apply for the qualitative studies. Let's begin with the first one, the interviews, which is very traditional and famous one. Generally, this can be structured or semi-structured. It depends on the level of flexibility needed, right? So how much we interview, right, to the people. So it depends on, so we are flexible, could be structured, semi-structured. It depends on the interviewer and the person who is giving the interview. And sometimes we go with the structured questions, and then we stay dynamic and change the pace or the content based on the interview. Researchers may conduct an in-depth interviews to understand the motivations behind a certain behavior. For an example, let's say a person wants to quit smoking, right? So why does he want to quit smoking? Because there could be quitting smoking, could be, let's say, because of the health issue. Quit smoking because of, let's say, first could be health issue, right? Smoking cost also, so you can say wastage of money, right? To smoke one cigarette, maybe it'll take maybe 20-30 minutes, so it's a time cost, right? Time cost. And furthermore is the opportunity cost. You can invest that entire sort of money in somewhere, maybe in the professional growth, maybe in the health, maybe anywhere, right? So that's why people want to quit smoking. So that's kind of a qualitative survey, and you can have the interviews and you can discuss with the people and identify. Focus groups. We frame the focus groups for a discussion to understand, let's say, small group of people to discuss the particular topic and provide the rich insights into the group dynamics and share the different opinions, right? So generally we come across the groups and then work together jointly. That helps, right? Ethnographies. There are ethnographies. Generally what they do is they go to the particular culture, or maybe a village or town, or maybe remotely located area. They live there maybe for a month. They pin themselves inside their lives, what people are living there, and they try to understand the experience at their own, first-hand experience by living that kind of life, right? So researchers, they generally immerse themselves in a particular community and they observe the behaviors, interactions under the natural settings without interfering or manipulating. And for an example, let's say ethnographist may go to the remote village and learn how people live there and what is the structure, right? Case studies, generally a past case study, correct, on a particular, let's say you want to study a particular and a particular subject or maybe anything, right? So case study on a particular organization, how is the work culture there? So one particular case study you can take. For an example, let's say researcher may study a company to understand its unique innovation strategy to keep or to increase the job satisfaction, right? Qualitative research has certain strength and limitations. Qualitative research has certain strengths and limitations. Let's see them. The strength is it offers the deeper and detailed insights into the complex issues, and it can uncover the underlying innovation, the motivations, values, and the social process. It gives us much more detailed understanding. It's flexible also. It adapts very quickly when we find something new. And then as our research progresses, and it quickly changes also. Limitations. Results are not generalizable. That's the bigger problem, because generally the group what we are studying is smaller, and we cannot just apply that everywhere, right? Subjectivity and potential bias of the researcher. So let's say the person who is conducting the interview could be biased, and he may present only one type of view. He may not present the contradicting view, and it's difficult to replicate also, because it's a unique setup which has been executed during that particular study, and it's difficult to replicate, unlike what we can do with the quantitative analysis. To overcome the limitations of both of them, to leverage the advantages of both of them, people said, let's use the mixed methods of research, right? Which is nothing but the hybridization of both of them. Hybridization of both of them. Historical development, if you look at this, generally there were debates of two fronts. Few people say that we want to go with the qualitative. Few people say that no, quantitative is better, right? And they were always fighting. And then the third kind of guys, they came and said, okay, let's not fight. Let's apply what is best. So they say, okay, pragmatic approach. It says that, okay, let's take the advantages of both of them and see what is working for what, and then apply both of them and see what is the output, right? So that is a next step which led to the mixed methods for research, which combines both qualitative and quantitative approaches, which combines both qualitative and quantitative approaches, right? And it acknowledges that both the types of data are necessary to fully understand the complex phenomena. They say that use the quantitative analysis to understand the numbers using the statistical tools, data science methods. Subsequently, apply the qualitative methods also to extract the patterns, understand much more deeper insights. So they say, okay, we'll apply both of them. No fighting, right? So combination gives the breadth and depth, because when we apply the quantitative data, it provides the broad overview, right? Such as, let's say, trend in the population. And when we apply the qualitative data, it provides the depth and context, such as, let's say, personal experiences. We can understand both of them. That's why it is useful. We can apply the triangulation method also. Triangulation is a mixed method approach which allows researchers to cross-validate the findings by comparing the data from multiple sources or different methods. In triangulation, what we can do is we cross-validate it. We apply multiple methods, and then after the validation, we accept the truth. Or after the validation, we accept the conclusion. It could be concurrent or sequential. Let's say in concurrent design, what we do is both the types of data are collected together simultaneously. So you are conducting a particular experiment, you are collecting the qualitative data as well as quantitative data. For an example, if I'm interviewing a person, I'll ask, what do you think, which party will win, right? So that's a qualitative data gathering. At the same time, I'll say, can you please tell me how many seats will one party win in your particular geographical location? That's a quantified data. So that's an example, but you can apply similar understanding for the complex examples, right? Mixed methods of this data collection, such as, let's say, timing, the sequence or the order of the implementation could be, let's say, qualitative and then the quantitative data collection. So you do the qualitative survey first, then you do the quantitative data collection, correct? Timing, sequential. It's sequential. Here you do together. Here it do sequential. It could be, you can have different weight factors also. Let's say, if you think quantitative is more relevant, you give more weightage to the quantitative data and just do the lesser weightage for the qualitative data to understand the overview. Mixing both of them, let's say how-to methods, both of them, qualitative, quantitative, they can be integrated with the studies. Deciding on how to mix the methods depends on what's your purpose, how to mix them. It depends on what's your purpose, what's your research design, and what are the strategies, correct? So based on that, you can decide. Now, there are four common methods, there are four mixed methods of designs, right? First one is called convergent parallel. Second one is called explanatory. Sequential design. And third one is called exploratory sequential design. And fourth one is called transformative mixed methods. Let's begin with the first one. First one is convergent parallel design. In that, the quantitative and qualitative data, they are collected together, they are gathered and analyzed simultaneously. That's why it is called convergent parallel design, because I am taking both the data types together and then the results are compared and interpretation were drawn, right? And the second one was explanatory sequential design. Second one was explanatory sequential design, where since the word says explanatory, which means we are going to apply the qualitative first. We go and collect the qualitative data first. We go and gather the quantitative data first, and then we apply the qualitative data to explain the quantitative findings. We gather the numbers, we find out the quantitative data, and then we apply the qualitative method to find out the explanation. Mixed methods. Next one is called exploratory sequential design. Exploratory itself says we are going to do the qualitative first, explore. And after that, we are going to apply the quantitative data. We are going to apply the quantitative method and collect the quantitative data to test or expand upon the initial findings. And last one was the transformative mixed methods. Which combines both the methods. And with an explicit focus on promoting, let's say, for an example, transformative mixed method, which combines both the methods and both the previous methods. Then often it is used for, let's say, for example, one particular study, right? Now, when do we conduct a mixed method of study? When do we pick that method? Let's say when we have both qualitative and quantitative data available with us. When we have both qualitative and quantitative data available with us, right? At that time, we use mixed methods of research. Sometimes we don't have the data, right? We have just either qualitative or quantitative. In that case, only one goes. When one data source may not be enough to explain the answer, to explain or to give the answer to the question. In that case, we have to have more data, right? Either could be qualitative or quantitative. When we want qualitative research to help in explaining the quantitative findings, right? So we have some sort of quantitative findings, but there are certain missing links, and we want to identify how qualitative research can help us to extract them. When we want to provide the alternate perspective, right? I got some sort of quantitative findings. I want to ensure that qualitative findings are also in line with the same, and then complement each other. That's why we can use both of them. When we want to generalize the findings to a large population, right? When we wanted to do, as we know that quantitative can be applicable to the large population, and qualitative can be used to extract the patterns out of that data and understand the experiences. The reason of using the mixed method is it combines the strengths of both qualitative and quantitative approaches. And it enhances the validity and reliability of the findings, because we can do the cross verifications also. And it allows researchers to explore the phenomena qualitatively and then confirm the findings quantitatively, right? So that's why we use it. General steps for conducting the mixed methods of research. First one, determine if the mixed method of research is the best approach to address the research problem what you are working on. If yes, then you select the mixed method, such as, let's say, either explanatory, exploratory, triangulation, or embedded, anything what we discussed. Write the detailed mixed method's purpose and the statement of our study. Then write a specific research question to address, such as, let's say, quantitative, qualitative, what are the aspects of our study. Choose a particular data to gather. So let's say you have decided both of them, then you have to gather the numbers quantitatively, and then you have to conduct the interviews to have the detailed explanation. Draw the visual diagrams of the procedures in your study, right? Draw the visual diagrams, and then collect and analyze both of them. And then finally, you write a report reflecting your findings, applying the mixed methods of research. There are certain strengths of the mixed method, such as, let's say, it is more comprehensive, compared to the standalone method. It gives both measurable and experiential aspects, and it allows more robust conclusions because we have statistical data as well as we have personal narratives applying both qualitative and quantitative methods, and it reduces the researcher's bias. One particular researcher's bias, let's say if I'm biased towards conducting interviews or something, then I may produce only one kind of study. When I have quantitative data, that goes much more reducing the bias. There are certain limitations of this method. For an example, it's complex and time consuming. We have to have expertise in both qualitative and quantitative. If you don't know how to use the data science, if you don't know about the data science, if you're not good at the statistical tools, if you're not good at the AI tools to analyze them, quantitative may not work well, right? So that's why there is a challenge. It may present a challenge in, let's say, integrating or reconciling the conflicting results also, right? Reconciling the conflicting results also. There are certain challenges and criticisms of the quantitative research also, right? Not just mixed quantitative research also, such as, let's say, ethical considerations, ethical concerns. Someone can manipulate the variables. Someone can manipulate the variables in the experimental design, such as, let's say, the fabricated graph. Sometimes research scholars present, right? They will fabricate the graphs and then they present. So those kind of manipulations can be there in quantitative research. Oversimplification of the complex issues, such as, let's say, quantitative methods might reduce the complex social phenomena to the few measurable variables, right? And potentially it may miss the broader context, correct? So the numbers may not describe the human's experiences, what they feel, and then it may oversimplify it and we miss the entire what has to be studied. External validity. Generalizability is often a challenge when the study sample doesn't accurately reflect the target population. That is one disadvantage. There are certain challenges and criticisms with the qualitative research also, such as, let's say, researcher's bias. Qualitative analysis, generally, it involves the interpretations and of the researchers, which means there is a risk that a personal bias can be influencing the results, correct? Reliability and the replicability. As we said, it's difficult to replicate the quantitative studies. It's difficult to replicate the quantitative studies due to context-spatial nature, right? Context-specific nature. Because the group on which, let's say, we are conducting, or the sample size is smaller and it cannot be generalized. And sometimes it can be time consuming also to gather the perspectives we have to get in the field and discuss with the people and then understand, right? Mixed methods of the research, they have also certain challenges, such as, let's say, complexity of the design, because as we discussed, it's complex. We have to have both the expertise and integration of the data. Combining sometimes the qualitative and quantitative data can be difficult. The combining both of them can be difficult, particularly when the findings are creating the conflicts. It's resource intensive. Mixed methods generally requires a huge amount of time, money, and the expertise, right? Than using the single method. So these are the challenges. Finally, if we conclude, quantitative, qualitative, and the mixed methods of research, they offer unique strengths. And they address the different type of research questions. So you have to find out what's your research question and accordingly select which method do you want. Understanding the procedures of collecting and analyzing the qualitative and quantitative data will enable us to reach the effective research design using the mixed method. So we have to understand the process nicely. If we understand both of them, the mixed method, it could be a great tool. By integrating these approaches, generally researchers can offer more robust, well-rounded conclusions, and it can be replicable also. It could be reliable and valid also, right? So, because in account of both of them, measurable data as well as nuanced human experiences. That's why there are three approaches. So what we discussed were qualitative, quantitative, and mixed methods of designs, and which one we have to use when. That's all I have for a day. Thank you very much for your time.